Great. So welcome everybody. I think we'll kick off now. My name's Helen Santa. I'm the director of Build Studios. Welcome to Business Development, Learning on the Job. This is an event around converting positive conversations into business opportunities, and you're very welcome today. I want to tell you a little bit about Build Studios before we begin. So for those of you who don't know us, we're a hub for the built environment sector. We're based at the top end of Westminster Bridge Road, nice views of the Houses of Parliament if you really crane your neck around the corner. And we're a collaborative workspace and unusually a sector-specific space solely for the built environment sector. We work with multiple small practices from freelancers up to small firms of sort of 6 to 10 people. And the key to us is our multidisciplinary nature. So we deliberately bring together architects and sit them alongside planners, engineers, interior designers, and the aim is really that we enable small practices to have access to the same kind of expertise that they might otherwise have when based in a large firm. And we really promote collaboration between the different disciplines within the sector. We're a social enterprise and we offer affordable workspace to small firms. We also run events and professional development activities, and this falls under that category. And then we also have an education and outreach programme that we run with local schools. It's a fairly simple quid pro quo in that our members are based in the office at affordable rents, but in return we ask that people take part in volunteering activities to go in and give careers talks to young people based in the area, to raise awareness of careers in the sector and also to broaden access. I don't know about any of you, but the careers advice I got about the built environment when I was at school was fairly non-existent. And we've got a huge talented group of young people based in the area. And our aim really is to try to raise their awareness of what jobs they might be able to access in the built environment. So before we start, if you're posting about the event on your various social channels, please use the handle @BuildStudios. If you could hashtag with Rebuild Studios so we know what you're saying, that would be great. And also please be aware that the event is being recorded. We will be circulating a recording after the event if you want to share it with any of your friends or colleagues. So to set the scene about the Rebuild Studios series, we at Build Studios are temporarily rebranding as we emerge from lockdown with a focus on renewal, hence the rebuild. And we're, along with most people at the moment, have been reassessing our offer and thinking very hard about what the sector needs as we emerge from lockdown. So we're a space provider. The nature of space, people's need for workspace is going to change massively. There's a need that's already being articulated for more flexible and part-time space for people who've actually discovered that working from home really isn't that bad after all, provided they do get a chance to escape the laundry and the children on occasions. But also as a sector, we're looking at changing working practices across the piece. Big questions around how do we work together and collaborate when we're still working apart? How do we engage with our clients and our communities when we're not able to be with them face to face as much as we would like? And also more generally for the sector, where will the work be coming from? What is the nature of the projects that we as built environment practices will be asked to respond to? And the Rebuild series programme is looking at how we address those issues, both more broadly in the built environment, but also specifically looking at your businesses, the various stages of developing a business, and how you can put yourself in the best position to win work at the moment. This today is the third in a series of 5 events that comprise our relaunch programme. We've been looking at the various aspects of setting up and running a business. So at our first event, we heard some really inspiring startup stories. Last week, we heard about how to avoid getting pigeonholed and developing a diverse work portfolio. All the videos and recordings for those events are available on our YouTube channel. So I think that this event on business development follows quite neatly from the last event on developing a diverse portfolio. It's a particularly challenging issue at the moment, especially for those who are just starting out with a new business. And even for those who do have established networks, maybe a more established firm, many of the usual conduits for winning business are closed. People particularly aren't meeting face to face. I think there's a broader question as to how useful networking events are more generally, but in the absence of that face-to-face contact, how do we look at positioning our business to win work? So work is out there, and our feeling is from our conversations with members that the sector is starting to come alive a little. And today we're looking at how we can best position ourselves to be considered for those opportunities that are coming forward. So how can we convert our positive conversations into business opportunities? And more pertinently at the moment, how can we generate those positive conversations in the first place? The format will be speaker presentations, so I'm going to run through the speakers one after the other. If you have questions that you'd like to ask of the speakers, please just put them in the chat and we will pick them all up at the end. And I will try to get through all of them at the end of the session. So without further ado, we've got a great lineup of speakers today, all experts in business development and communications. And I'm really looking forward to hearing their take on this issue. So can I first turn to Annie Clift and Stuart Wilks from Limeslade, who are members of Build Studios, and they're going to kick off the presentations today. Thank you, guys.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. So Annie, if I start, is that all right?
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Okay. So basically, Annie's going to pick up on a few of the bits and the more interesting bits in a minute. I'll start with the boring bit, and she'll do the fun bit. So hopefully, I'll talk less than she will. So essentially, what we're talking about when we talk business development, we're talking about making friends, and that's really the bit that Annie's going to chat about in a minute. And we were talking to somebody yesterday, and he was saying, you know, our business, really, our job is to help people out, make their lives easier, which is essentially what you're doing when you're doing business development. You're finding people that you can work with and helping them to make their lives easier. So that's what we kind of focus on. But what I wanted to really talk about was the relationship between marketing and business development, because I think a lot of people sometimes miss this point. And hopefully I'm not going to step on any toes when I just very lightly touch on marketing. But I think, you know, people very often forget that marketing needs to be part of your business development and sales strategy. So BD and sales need to also be part of your marketing strategy. The two can't be separate. So I know we've got some marketing experts on here today as well. So they're obviously going to talk about marketing, but I don't think you can separate the two. So it's very important when you're planning all this stuff out to talk to your marketing people and make sure that they're in touch with you and you're in touch with them, and the two talk to each other. So, you know, I've always seen marketing very much as being the key to the door of business development. So whether you're organizing events like this, whether you're putting brochures together, the communications that you do, it's all part of the door opening process to making friends and communicating with people. So it's very important that you have, you know, things like CRM systems, database marketing, lead management, and all of that sort of stuff in place for business development. It's something, no matter how small your business is as well, or how large it is, it's something that you really ought to have in place. So we have, and it's interesting when, you know, when we work with lots and lots of different companies, and some of them have an Excel spreadsheet, some of them have emails in Outlook, some of them have a lovely CRM system that they've never used. And there's all sorts of, there's a whole range of things that people have, but it's quite rare that we actually find people using a really good CRM system well. And it's fairly rare that we find a really good CRM system. They're really hard to find as well. So it's, CRM is customer relationship management, basically a database full of all your contacts. So whether you keep all your contacts in a spreadsheet, that's basically a CRM as well. So there's a whole load of ways of keeping hold of your contacts and making sure that you're managing them and tracking them. And that's kind of the role of the marketing team, but it's also the role of business development. And the two have to mesh together. So you have to work together on those sorts of things so that you can identify the contacts that you're working with, the people, the prospects, all of those sorts of people. I've always been a big fan of marketing and database marketing. It's really important that, you know, the contacts, particularly if you're working in professional services, no matter where those professional services lie, that you have a handle on the contacts that you're dealing with. And so, yeah, so communicating between the two, marketing, business development, anyone helping with the business development and anyone helping with marketing has to communicate together. If you're doing business development, if you're a business development person as such, I don't know what sort of the range of people we've got on the line today, but if you're a BD person, don't assume that marketing are just the brand police who sit in the corner and make brochures look pretty. They have a far more important role. I think the thing with Annie and myself is that we've both done both jobs. So we've both done marketing and we've both done BD. So we kind of, unlike some people, we do get the fact that both areas tend to. I worked in a company where certainly at some points in its history, there was quite an antagonistic relationship between business development and marketing. So you'd have the BD guy, and very often the BD people are paid on commission or they're paid on bonuses. So they have the potential to earn lots of money. They very often get all the good gigs. They go out to all the fancy countries and fly first class everywhere. And the marketing people are very often left sitting in the office in London or wherever, not getting to see the lovely countries and the white beaches and that sort of thing. So it's quite important that the two do communicate together and work well together, because when they work well together, and there's lots of articles on this, you can Google it and see what there is. There's a whole raft of reasons why the two really should work together, because the stronger your relationship with marketing and business development is, the stronger your business development actually can be. So there's been a few examples of that over the years where I've worked with people where they've kind of either sidelined the marketing team, or I've even worked with people. There was a guy at my last place where he completely understood the benefit of good marketing as a conduit to his business development. So we put on conferences and events a bit like this, but mostly face to face. And he used those as a tool to develop his contact database. So he'd go in, meet people, shake their hand, be very nice to them, which was his job. Our job was to put all those people in the room and make sure that they all enjoyed themselves and found it useful. So by working together and him communicating well with us, he got the most out of it and we got the most out of it. So that's my real point that I want to make today, is not to forget the close relationship and the importance of having a close relationship between marketing and BD. And then I think Annie's, as I say, is going to pick up on some of the more fun stuff about business development and the getting out there. So Annie?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about how you develop a network and how you grow your contacts and in order to do BD. So the first point is that you're going to start developing a network. You need to get out there, you need to be meeting people. It's very difficult in the current circumstances to do that. At the moment, our main focus needs to be on maintaining those relationships we already have and looking for chances to meet new people where we can, online or at events like this, but it's not the same as it used to be. But as Stuart said right at the beginning there, the main focus of doing business development should be about making friends with people. People like to work with people, and particularly in professional services, we don't have a product as such to sell. We are selling our expertise or the people we work with, and people want to trust in the people that they're doing business with. So how you go about that is just being nice and friendly and meeting people and being interested in them. So getting to know them, not being interested in just what they can bring to you as a potential source of work, but being interested generally in their work, their career, their interests, their family, their home life, all of those things, and building that rapport with people. And then again, remembering that someone is not always going to be directly useful to you, but how can they be useful to your wider network? How can you link the dots? So and I think again Stuart touched on it briefly, but it's kind of a lot of the job of a business development person is working as a matchmaker. So can this person be useful to this person? Can you do a favor for this person, in the hopes that when they need to recommend someone comes back? You quite often come across a certain type of BD person who is looking for, this is my target client and they are the only person I'm interested in speaking to, and they're potentially missing so many other links in the chain, because you never know who you get chat to, who might know someone, who might be asked for a recommendation, who might be able to put you in touch with someone else. So make sure that you do look around beyond your target client. As we begin to go back to normal, going back to events is more going to be more important. At the moment, we have just online events. World is starting to open up, but I can't imagine events taking place at the moment. Finding events at the moment, you know, look for stuff that's interactive. Join live like you are now, because if you don't, you're going to miss the chance to speak to people. You can see people are chatting in the chat. Put your questions in the chat, speak in the chat, so your name gets out there. Let people know that you're here and that you're getting involved. And when we go back to normal and you start looking at attending events, think about who you want to meet at those events. So where are your competitors going to be? That's not where you want to be. Architects are terrible for attending events with other architects. Lawyers love to attend events with other lawyers. You know, we are all kind of programmed to go, right, I've got to go to this. But if you're an architect, your clients are not likely going to be at an RIBA event. It's nice to catch up with your colleagues and have a chat, but think about where there'll be less architects in the room and more colleagues, more potential clients. And then when you are networking, you know, don't go in with the hard sell. Hi, I'm so-and-so, I do this, here's my business card, goodbye, call me when you need me. That's, you know, it is something that you see a lot, and it's a terrible way to do things. Again, be interested, small talk about things other than work. You know, get to know the person, think about how you can help them, how you can fit in other ways that are not directly down to work, and what you can do together. You know, it might not be work, but can you put them on? You know, we organize a lot of events, so that's something we always think about doing. We need to recommend a speaker for something, can we put you in touch with this? Do you want to speak at this event? Do you want to be part of something else? And then afterwards, and after webinars and all of these things, and at the moment, this is the most important thing, keeping in touch with your network. So make sure you're following up with people, you're dropping them a line regularly. You know, you're having little Zoom chats with people where you can, catching up and having a little chat and seeing how they're doing. If you have a CRM system or a spreadsheet, keeping that up to date, particularly if you're a larger firm. You know, for Stuart and I, there's just us two, so we can normally kind of work between us without being too, but when you're a big firm, you don't want someone from this department calling this person for a coffee one week, and then 3 days later someone from another department is, can we have a cup of coffee together? So making sure that you're all speaking the same language, you all know what's going on. And again, seeing where you can help each other out, where you can put each other forward. That's really one of the most important things. And then my final point, as a lot crammed into a small space, is not to expect it to work overnight. Business development is a long-term thing. You know, it's very rare, it does happen, but it's very rare that you go to an event or you attend a webinar, someone goes, oh, yes, I need your services, call me tomorrow, we'll start working together. You know, a lot of the time, it takes a long time. It takes building up that relationship. So when things don't happen overnight, you know, just keep at it, keep those relationships alive, because you never know when they're going to come back and come into fruition later down the line. And I think that is everything in a short nutshell. Unless, Stuart, you want to add anything to that?
No, I was going to, the only thing I was perhaps going to add was just the fact that, you know, things are very much on life support at the moment. So, you know, as you were saying, you know, it's very hard. And I'm not sure anybody has managed to say, all the people that we work with that kind of do the same thing that we do, speaking around to people, is that, you know, you can keep, it's very important to keep the relationships that you have alive at the moment. You know, you can do meetings, you can do Zoom chats with, and it's very important to make sure that you do carry on doing Zoom chats. So people that you've not spoken to perhaps over the last few months, make sure that you drop them a line and say, do you want to have a quick online coffee or something like that? But you can't really, I don't think, make new friends in this kind of situation. It's very hard to pick up new relationships. You can develop some that you may have made early on, which we've done successfully over the last few months, I think. But yeah, the key is to keep in touch with the people that you know, even no matter how tenuously you know them. Do, you know, make sure that those relationships are being kept, as I say, on life support and kept alive. But yeah, other than that, I think that's pretty much it from us.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Stuart and Annie. Really interesting insight and tips there. I think I'm always struck by how important it is to remember the basics in all of this. Being nice to people, it sounds so basic, but actually I think that the best business approaches I've ever experienced have been the occasions when it's only been probably a couple of weeks later that I've even realised I was being sold to. because actually the conversation I had felt nothing like a networking discussion. There were no business cards in sight. I just had a really, really good chat, and you remember those people. And I think also this tip about being generous to your network, so that if there's a piece of work or a lead or an individual who's maybe not right for you, think about who you can put them in touch with, because the favours do get returned. So that's really insightful. Thank you very much for that. I'd now like to turn to our second speaker, Vivi Koroma from Jestico and Wilks. Vivi, great to have you here today. Can I hand over to you, please, to give your take on this?
Great. Hi, everyone. Many thanks for having me. My name is Vivi Koroma, and I am back from a year of maternity leave during a pandemic, which was interesting to say the least. I'm back to working on marketing and communications for Jestico and Wilks, and we're an architecture and design studio working across disciplines, from schools to housing to hotels. We have offices in London and Prague. I'm really, really enjoying the conversations so far with the different points that Annie and Stuart made. And I'd like to give my 2 cents. Firstly, pointing out that for me, marketing and business development are 2 very distinct and separate areas of business. However, in the same vein, and agreeing with Stuart's earlier point, I believe that there are a multitude of benefits to considering a more integrated approach when thinking of either your marketing or your business development strategies. It's important to remember that it's all connected. Now, my time away from practice has allowed me to bring a degree of fresh thinking into the way we do things as a studio. Fresh thinking into how we utilise the power of marketing, which for some is the great relationship builder. I've been thinking about how our marketing and comms can develop our existing business relationships and forge new ones along the way. And I'd like to share some of my thinking with you today. A lot of my time spent in my role involved social media marketing and events marketing. And there's so much to discuss within the different areas of marketing, as I'm sure my fellow guest speakers can attest to, but I'd like to focus on these 2 areas. These are 2 areas of marketing that we concentrated on extensively pre-corona at Jestico and Wilks. And it's interesting to consider how this may change now. I'll talk about event marketing first and foremost. At Jestico and Wilks, we are a very social office, and we were very partial to hosting events as part of the architectural event calendar. So taking part in Koroma Design Week. Last year, we collaborated with Porcelanosa, a Spanish manufacturer, to produce an immersive installation for the duration of the week, which, went really, really well. And as well as, events like Koroma Design Week, we also take part in London Festival of Architecture, MIPIN, and other industry events. And this was seen as a prime way to attract and develop business relationships. Our marketing at Jestico and Wilks is relationship led. So it's less so the traditional kind of form of marketing, so less so advertising and more communications based. We had an established threefold strategy towards our participation at events. And we too use various different CRM, so customer relationship management software. I don't think there's one really good one, but yeah, we use several. And so we split it up into threefolds. Firstly, the pre-launch. So that's your newsletter strategy, your personal invites. So we encourage, because we're an office of 100, we encourage my colleagues to kind of get in touch with the clients that they have a personal relationship with. The second part is the actual event. So we flex our muscles as hosts. We like to do that. And then the third fold is post-event. So gathering attendee feedback, newsletter strategy, social media thank you, staying in touch reminders, and so on. Then you guessed it, a pandemic happens and we need to pivot. For us, most pressingly, it looks like going virtual, but we have to ask ourselves, what value can we provide to our audiences, to our potential clients virtually? It's important to note that if we can't provide value, it's best not to do anything at all. But for you, it may look like something really different. It could be based around, so the value that you provide could be based around thought leadership, for example. You could consider, in our current circumstances, you could consider starting a webinar series much like this, or starting a podcast, which I've actually seen quite a few practices do. So it's starting a podcast around something you value as an office or as a practitioner, something you have an opinion on, something such as, I don't know, climate change or placemaking, something that your audiences will find useful and relevant. The idea behind this is that value attracts, and through the waves that you create by finding and communicating your value, you can attract potential opportunities too. However, beware of what they're calling Zoom fatigue. So it's important not to host an event for event's sake, but to be able to provide real value. And this value looks different depending on your craft and what you're good at as a practitioner. I'd also like to add that we shouldn't forget the power of the network. And Annie spoke a little bit about this, but there's so much that you can get out of collaborating with others in your industry to provide collective value. Like what Build Studios do. I mean, collaboration is key. It's a win-win. On the back of this, the threefold strategy that I mentioned still applies to virtual events. So it's about converting interest to attendance, and then attendance to a conversation, then into a warm lead. I understand that sometimes it's not as simple as that, and I'll be the first to admit it, remembering that it takes time to attract the right clients, and even more time to develop these relationships. Even so, the strategy should always remain relationship-led. In conclusion, we need to define value. We need to define the value that we can provide. We need to look at how we can collaborate with like-minded organizations and serve our audiences better. As such, event marketing in the future becomes more targeted and more collaborative, hopefully. So my second thread of thinking is around the power of social media marketing to amplify business opportunities and business development strategies. I use the word amplify as social media alone cannot win jobs. You need to think of the whole picture. You need to think about your offering. You need to think about your value, remembering that it's all connected. So think about your audience and your client base. Who are they? Create content to serve them specifically and be very intentional about this. You can do this in different ways using the various social media channels. Tailor your messaging for each platform. This is really important because different mediums deserve a different type of message. Your content on LinkedIn might not be delivered in the same way as you post on Instagram, for example. On social media, you should always lead with value. Try and address a problem for your audience with a solution. I'll give you an example. We recently posted our own solution to how social distancing might look like in schools post-lockdown. We do a lot of work in schools, and that's one value that we've identified to give to our audiences. And we produce some layout drawings using the Instagram carousel format, which is, I don't know, for you Instagram users out there, it's the format where you can swipe to the left and you kind of get delivered a story. This is such a powerful format, and so we use that to tell a story about how we think social distancing might look like in schools. And this post provided value, and as such garnered more interest and more comments than any other of our recent posts. So as you think about your audience, think about how you would like them to perceive you. would you like them to perceive you as a thought leader in your industry, as a friendly practice to work with, as, you know, a practice that's keen on cycling? How would you portray your organization on your social media platforms? And the way that you do this is important. So you should see your social media channels as an extension to your website almost. So a point that I'd like to emphasize again, and to finish, I'd like to emphasize that it is all about, you know, it's all connected. Business development, marketing, it is all connected. And with this in mind, I hope that we can adopt a more integrated approach to our business development, one that considers all sides of marketing, including social media marketing and events marketing, however that may look like. Thank you.
Vivi, thank you. That's absolutely fantastic. Really interesting take on particularly the importance of social media and this issue of value as well, and defining value. For me, that's very has really sort of chimed with me, because before we started this event series, we had a really long look and asked ourselves quite closely, are we offering stuff that people are actually going to want to hear about? I think this concern about sort of Zoom for Zoom's sake or events for events' sake is particularly important in this era of Zoom fatigue. And I think there's this issue of value, and I think also online, if online events are going to be something that are here for the foreseeable future, I think there's another issue around how we potentially look at kind of monetizing that. What's the value of online? Is online something that can be sold, or is it actually something that is really always going to be consigned to the marketing budget? And I think that's something it might be interesting to discuss in a bit more detail. So thank you so much for that. I'll now turn to our final speaker for today, Rachel Birchmore from AreBe. Rachel and I have spoken in the past about the importance of a strategy behind business development. I'm looking forward to hearing what she's got to say today. So Rachel, over to you.
Thanks, Helen. Okay, I'm going to share my screen, so I'll just say, hold on a moment. I won't do two things at once. Here we go. My challenge is to try and say something a bit different to what the others have already said. So I think I completely agree with Stuart and Annie around the sort of making friends, and I think that's a really important focus on. This is about making friends, not about selling, which I know scares people. And Vivi, I couldn't have said it better myself, it's all connected and all about value. I think that's great. So I'll attempt to say something a bit different. I'm going to talk a bit more generally, I guess. I tend to work around strategy, and I coach. So most of what I do is coaching around business development, leadership and strategy. So what I do is fairly broad. And 99% of what I do is in the built environment, mainly with architects and engineers. And I used to do business development and marketing together in-house for a big project management company, as some people on the call will know. I tend to have several projects on the go, partly because I'm doing my own business development, and partly because I'm a person who likes a lot of different things going on. So I've just finished a piece of research which I did with a writer and brand strategist called Emma Keat. That was on evolution of practice, and it's finished with a series of articles that we wrote for AreBe Journal. And actually I'm going to refer to them slightly within the talk. But it's worth reading the whole thing. They're pitched at different stages of evolution of architectural practices. Jestico and Wiles are actually within one of them, so Vivi may have read them already. I also, on the coaching side of things, co-created and co-deliver a leadership development program called Step Up. I do that with another coach called Louise Rogers. And another of Vivi's points was about podcasts. And Louise and I have just launched a podcast called Coaches on the Couch, which was obviously set up around the sort of virtual environment. I've really struggled to think of what to put into my 10 minutes today. So I've got a sort of collection of ideas which, as I say, are quite general and hopefully helpful. So the first one's on clients. We're obviously in a really weird place at the moment, and clients' needs are changing quite rapidly. They're not too sure what they are, and they're very fluid. So being tuned into your clients, either through their external comms or through talking to them directly in whatever way you can, is really important. Second point, I've said they're not islands. You know, clients are individuals who sit within a circle of advisors and friends and various other people. And I think when you're thinking about how to approach clients, think about that bigger picture and that wider circle. They obviously have their own interests and agendas, and if you can engage with that and certainly understand that and then become relevant to that, then I think there is more chance of actually making a connection, and obviously this is what it's all about. And Annie and Vivi both made this point about one conversation does not a client make. This isn't go to an event, whether that's virtual or in person, and come back with a project. There's a lot of people who, particularly when I do BD coaching around networking, say, yes, but I go to events and when I come back, it never comes to anything. You know, this takes time. That first point is about making them know who you are. And then it might take 2 or 3 years to get to the point where it's a project. And in between, you're increasing mutual understanding and increasing relevance of what you do to that person. You can only do that if you really seek to understand what that person's all about. So yeah, clients. So this is just taken from the first of the AreBe Journal articles with these sketches from McCloy Mchenwa. And I think there's a couple of things. This first one is about setup, starting out, and emerging practices. And there were a couple of key things in here which I think relate to business development. The first one is the sorts of clients and collaborators who you seek. Obviously, they're also at different stages of their trajectory. And if you can connect in some way to that. So the 2 quotes here, which were taken from the article, one from Neil Murphy at Town and the other from Duncan Blackmore at Arrant Land, both of whom, when we interviewed them, which was probably a couple of years ago now, actually were, you know, quite new themselves. So they wanted to work with people who were at a similar point. And you can see there the Duncan and Neil's reasons for that. These 3 quotes were taken from last week's Build Studios event, because I think this really summed up something that's quite important around business development. So the first 2, David and Catherine, were talking about luck and serendipity. And there's a lot of conversation at the moment about whether or not serendipity still exists within this virtual space. Yeah, I think it completely does, but it's different. You've got to create it quite differently. So David talked about putting themselves in luck's way. And Catherine talked about being very strategic she talked about a single focus mission, I think she called it, which is the sort of thread that goes through their work. And then she talked about being strategic about the people that they wanted to talk to because they were relevant to that theme, and then working out how to reach those people in quite creative sort of ways. So that real strategic thinking, so making your own luck, which I thought was really powerful. And then Chris Bryant, excuse me, made a really good point about the progress of conversations and how you win work actually being much messier than it sounds when you describe it 5 years on, and how you move from contact to contact or from project to project. And that's what the little sketch at the bottom sort of says. You know, it's important, particularly when you're starting out, to have a lot of conversations and to see everything as an opportunity. I mean, within a framework of your strategy. So this is the sort of work we want to do, and this is who we are in terms of identity. But within that framework, conversations are always opportunities. And I think Annie made a similar point sort of earlier about not being too focused about who you try and talk to, because that peripheral and lateral vision is actually really important to business development. It's how you connect. This is all about connections and networks. It's not about a straight line to a new project. I think a lot of the people on the call are sort of earlier stage in progression to this, but this was the second in the evolution of practice articles, and it's this sort of snowball effect as practices start to mature. And the important thing here from a BD point of view is as a practice grows, you take on people, and those people need to be equipped to help with business development. So they need to know what the message is. You know, the founders tend to hold that in their head. And when you get to this stage, it needs to be articulated somehow. And these people, the newer people within an organization, often need help to contribute to that. This is where a lot of the coaching I do tends to come in at this stage, as people need equipping to contribute. And that's the quote from the article, which sums that up. The next one was about succession. I think the important thing here was that the groundwork for a successful succession is done quite early on. So by the time you get to founders stepping away and next generation coming through, really these people already need to have a voice, need to have a profile, and need to have their own connections. And that groundwork is done further back in the evolution of practice. So just to sum up on that, it's, as everybody has said, this is about building relationships over time. At the moment, it's very much about tuning in to changing client needs and how you will remain relevant or increase your relevance to that. I think it's about creativity at the moment. So yes, in-person meetings have gone away, or okay, they're starting to come back, but certainly the big networking event isn't there. I firmly believe you can create those meetings within a virtual space, but it is different. So thinking about how you might do that. I mean, even imagining what it would be like if you set up a business now. Yeah, how would you actually do that? We're all creative people. We would think of something. So what would you do? Creating your own serendipity. And this point about being strategic, so joining, you know, Vivi's point, everything is connected, join everything up towards something, and then you will have more impact. You know, we've all got limited time, limited resources, and if you can be strategic about where you're trying to get to, I don't mean being rigid, but where you're trying to get to and who you are, then it's much easier to take one action and get several outcomes from that. And that is all I have to say.
Rachel, thank you so much. Really insightful, and I think a really purely serendipitous on our part, but I think the order of the presentations today worked really well with you sort of wrapping up in a more strategic kind of few end thoughts in that respect. I would really like if the speakers have some insight on this, to explore this issue of serendipity and creating your own luck in a virtual space in a little bit more detail. And I know it's the sort of million-dollar question at the moment, but it would be great to have any thoughts on how we do, what specific things could we consider doing in this virtual space, particularly if we're starting out from scratch and don't yet have those networks or an existing kind of contacts web to sort of keep warm. What things can people do to help generate those leads, even if they're early stages? Do you have any more thoughts on that, Rachel?
I mean, I think doing a combination of things. So social media, obviously there's a lot of noise on social media at the moment, or it seems like it's very congested. And, you know, I've been thinking about that myself. Is it that there's more there than there is normal, or is it just that everybody's moved all of their activity that's normally in person all onto LinkedIn? So actually there's probably less happening actually than there is normally, but it's now all on a single channel. So I think also, as well as there being more there, I think people are also spending more time on it. So you've perhaps got more chance of engaging actually with people that you want to at the moment than you normally would have when you're in person. You know, there's certainly senior people from some of the big architectural practices who are appearing on social media that weren't there before. So that must be happening in other organizations. So yeah, I think that's probably my input.
No, that's interesting, and I suppose perhaps in the absence of some of these face-to-face opportunities that people have had previously, there's a need to be seen, and you're right. Maybe that is the opportunity that they're there when they may normally be elsewhere. Vivi, Annie, Stuart, do you have any thoughts on that point?
Yeah, if I can dive in, I think, you know, when this all kicked off, we looked around and thought, well, that's the end of our business then. And almost packed up and went home. But actually, you know, one of the first things that we did was to start doing a series of webinars. And as you say, you know, that there is a lot out there, but we needed to find something and to get in quick as well, and to find a niche. So we managed to, I think, fairly successfully do that. And actually, you know, talking about making your own luck, we, as a result of that, the first week, I think we just did it with some friends that we knew, and we just thought, well, we'll invite these people along and have a chat. And then all of a sudden, a load of people signed up and wanted to join us and wanted to be part of that sort of series. And we did actually, yeah, we did make quite a lot of new friends that we'd not come across before. So there was, you know, a construction barrister who was on the call who wanted to speak at the next one. He was a QC and he was, you know, very well respected in the sector. And again, so immediately we became aligned with a load of people who knew what they were talking about, which was quite nice. So yeah, so you can do, if you jump on ideas like that and make friends through organizing something that, again, it's just helping people out. You're giving these people a platform, as you guys have done for us today. You know, we very much appreciate being asked to speak at this, and it's those sort of opportunities that it's amazing how many people think, you know, when you're organizing something like this, or I'm not sure if they'll want to speak at our event, and everybody bites your hand off. So it's, you know, everybody always wants to speak at an event, or everybody almost always wants to be involved in something. And if you ask them, they'll just be, firstly, they'll be flattered and they'll be grateful for the opportunity. So it's those sort of things that I think, so long as you've got something good and interesting to talk about, you know, it's you know, that's an ideal way to go about it.
That's interesting. Thanks. Vivi, have you got anything to add on this issue around sort of creating luck and creating opportunities?
Yeah, something that I would just add would be, you know, everyone's attending a webinar of some form, you know, these days, and there is the chat box, and I can see people are doing it already, but a practical point would be to put you know, your network within the chat box, put your email address, you know, where you're from when you're introducing yourself. That's a really good way, because you are, in fact, you know, creating your own luck. You don't know who might see that. You won't know. You don't know who you know might remember, or take down your contact details from doing that. So yeah, a bit of what Rachel said, being creative with it and finding different ways.
Yeah, I wonder as well, I had a question that occurred to me beforehand about this issue of confidence in networking. And this is a sort of thinking aloud point, but I wonder if for those people who actually struggle with face-to-face networking, there are actually some advantages to being hidden behind a screen in some respects. And actually it's so much easier to write a note in the chat box than have to actually put yourself out there. You know, how impactful that is, who knows, but I think it's a good start, and it's a good opportunity. I think really interesting points coming through the chat now as well, and the sort of the tone that people are using in terms of their promotion and business development on LinkedIn, and a point that the sort of more personal stories seem to be getting a lot more traction. I wonder if, Annie, you've got any thoughts on this. This speaks very well to your point about being so human at events and being interested in other people.
Absolutely. I think stuff with a personal element has always done better on social media. You know, again, people react to people, and so when they see photos of people or something nice about someone or something interesting and a little bit more personal, they do react to that better. But at this point in time, even more so, I think, you know, the way we're interacting with people is on a much more personal level. You know, today we've all let each other into our homes. You know, we see our kids running in the background, or the dog or the cat, and everyone's getting a little bit more of a glance and seeing each other as human in a way that perhaps we didn't before. When we're all in the office, we're there till late at night. You know, if you're at events after work and you don't go home, and you're kind of, nobody really cares or knows about your lifestyle outside of work and what you really want to be getting home to. So definitely adding that personal element on there, giving people a reason to look at you and to react to you, and engaging with other people is very important. You know, not just pushing stuff out there just to keep yourself out there, but looking at what other people are writing and talking to others on there and commenting and sharing and tagging other people in your post and all of those things, just making it all, you know, it's social media, so making sure that it is a social thing.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. There's I'm trying to sort of follow the comments as they're popping up as well, and an issue of geography's been raised as well from Rachel Harris, and I think you know, perhaps this is another example of an opportunity where geographical constraints have meant that people aren't physically able to attend events, but Rachel is Sheffield based, and we wouldn't have seen Rachel at a Build Studios event prior to this. And I think that's great that we've been able to sort of put our network out more widely. There was also some points made by Melissa Walford, who's a director of the Museum of Architecture at a previous event, which was for people who may have childcare responsibilities. Evening events always seem to be at the sort of toxic 5 till 7 p.m. slot when all hell is breaking loose at home. And we're actually now in a position, if people do have young kids, then you can mute yourself and you can, so no one else has to hear the squawking, but you can actually be a little more part of that discussion than you were previously. So this, I think, is an area where it's possible, even if you're sort of slightly out of the loop physically, to be involved. So interesting to hear from Rachel's comment as well, asking whether people have been able to generate work during lockdown. So I know our friends at Limeslade have. Any comments from the panel in this respect? How is sort of how is business development going during this period where we can't see each other face to face? Rachel, do you have how's it been for you guys?
Yeah, good. I mean, it sort of early on, I guess it was slow, and then it seems that there's been a shift in the last, I'd say, month, to what people are starting to put their heads up now and starting to think about how they're taking their business forward. So good. I mean, you know, I suppose people can't stay static for too long, can they? So although we're being forced to sort of shut our lives down and stay still, people actually won't do that for very long. So it's not long before they start thinking, well, what are we going to do next? And what help are we going to need with that? So they are actually now, certainly that's what I've seen with clients and personally, things moving forward. Yeah.
Interesting. Vivi, it's an unfair question to ask you when I know you've only been back at work a week, but what's the mood in your sphere of the sector as to how things are picking up?
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely positive about things, and one of our focus points is kind of looking after our current clients, our current client base, you know, not forgetting to drop them a line and, you know, reconnecting with our current client base. I think that's an important, it relates to relationship management, and that relationship is key, and we're definitely taking more of that approach, and you never know.
And Stuart and Annie, some final thoughts from you on that. How do you see this? I'm asking you to do your Mystic Meg impression, but your sort of crystal ball tips for how this is going to evolve.
You want to go first?
Yeah, okay. So I think it's going to be, I think we will start to see people going back to normal, and we are going to start to see, probably not this year, maybe towards the end of the year at best, some events taking place, but I can't imagine there's going to be any quick return. But as we start to return to work, I think we'll start seeing a little bit more face-to-face kind of one-on-one meetings and things. But I do think this kind of stuff is going to stay around as well. I think people are going to want more flexibility. They are going to want to log in, particularly for the kind of you know, your CPD stuff. You know, why do you need to be in a room when you're just listening to something? You can do it online, or you know, and catching up with people who are further away. You know, we have clients all over the place, all over the UK and also in the Middle East and stuff, so there's kind of no need to travel as much as we previously might have. Kind of cut down on that and go, yeah, we'll do catch-ups on Zoom. Beforehand, I think it might have seemed a bit strange to do a kind of BD catch-up, go, oh, shall we have a Zoom meeting with someone you've not seen for a while? But now it has become normal to kind of go, oh, shall we have a coffee on Zoom, rather than I'll catch you next time I'm in Manchester, or I'm wherever. So I think that will definitely change.
I think Annie's picked up most of it. I think the really interesting point that somebody's made up there is the thing about geography. I mean, I do a lot with the Chartered Institute of Building, and we held a webinar, our first webinar. Again, we were very quick, and I said, you know, we've got to get on this quick because the members are desperate for information. So we did a webinar, and we had people from Bahrain and New Zealand and all around the world. And a London seminar that would be the only thing that we would have held previously would never have attracted people from around the world, simply because it wasn't possible. So yeah, you're making connections now indirectly with people that you would never have been able to speak to before. So I do think, yeah, there's certainly going to be, you know, we've shifted, haven't we, as a people from going to events to now being able to speak to people around the world. And that's, you know, something that I don't think will change. But I do think also the importance of face-to-face handshaking, you know, all of that sort of chatting to people over a beer is going to come back, and there will definitely be there's always going to be a need for that, I think, because no matter how good Zoom is, it's never going to replace the contact with people and the actual face-to-face stuff that you can't get over an online conversation.
Great. Well, I think that's probably a good note to end on, really. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our 4 speakers today for their insight, some really inspiring presentations, and I think a really great mix from my perspective of strategic thoughts as well as some really practical tips as well. I hope you've all been able to take away some useful pointers for your own business. Please do join us at our next event. We've got another great lineup of speakers next week, which is our winning work in our tenders, competitions and bids, oh my event. One of my favourite titles that Luke has come up with for this series. It's quite a daunting world at times, the sort of competition and tender process, particularly when we're looking at public sector procurement. And we've got some people to kind of guide you through the process and help you win work through those channels. I think particularly as many public sector procurement channels are still very much open with work being commissioned at the moment. Please do sign up via our website, buildstudios.co.uk. And thank you very much for your time, and we look forward to seeing you at the next event. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.